Now, fire and ice are a deadly combo in Elden Ring. Each on their own are powerful as it is, and you can even combine them for some pretty great synergies. But there is one combo in Elden Ring that's better than all of them combined, and instantly procs build up after build up after build up. Today, ladies and gents, we'll take a look at one of the most devastating frost and fire synergies you should definitely pay attention to, because it absolutely melts, or should I better say, freezes bosses instantly. If especially you're like me and really enjoy the frost build-up but kinda wish the game gave you more opportunities to just spam it, well, I have the setup for you, so let's begin. Now, of course, we did cover this in yesterday's video, but you will need a special sword that I believe fits best for this kind of setup, and that's going to be Zammers curved sword, which already comes with a pretty awesome effect called the Zammer Ice Storm. Essentially, you just impale the ground with a weapon and then unleash a storm around you that persists for a couple of seconds and deals frost damage, stagger, and build up in a pretty large area around you. Don't get discouraged by the limited range on it. For this type of spell, for the type of damage it does, and for the huge amount of stagger, it's definitely enough. And besides, you're going to eventually get close to enemies anyway, so might as well get them in style. But there's a few ways to actually make this even more powerful. Now, obviously, you could maybe add some fire in the mix, and it definitely works nice. In a first example that I have, I went with Misericord, which is one of the best critical weapons in the game, probably the highest at 140. And since we are providing a ton of stagger against enemies, it fits quite well because you can follow up with a backstab or a front stab from that, and that will deal massive amounts of damage. But that's not the only thing we use it for. We also use it with a fire effect on it, or a fire affinity, to reset the frost buildup so that we can more quickly follow up with a second one. This is the first setup that I use. Of course, not the best in the game, but Misericord is a pretty good weapon to do that. It's a fast dagger and also has that critical strike component. Now, it does work pretty well against most of these bigger brutes, but let me show you the more improved method, and the one that you will want to use if you don't really want to worry about, well, slapping enemies' butt cheeks to, just reset the build-up. This brings us to Fire's Deadly Sin, one of those incantations that seems to always be in the center of some of the most devastating builds in this game, and it's in the center of another one right now. My theory was that, well, if fire is the best option to remove the frost build-up so that I can apply a quick one again, what if I had a way to kind of perpetually cause fire around me so that I don't have to rely on different weapons? Well, here is where Fire's Deadly Sin comes into play, and not just that, after doing some testing, it completely blew me away, completely exceeded all my expectations how well it pairs up with a frost buildup like Zammer's sword. In this case, you will want to start with a Fire's Deadly Sin that lasts for a pretty long time. Go ham into one of these friends of yours in the sewers, and what happens is that you don't just get to reset that frost buildup right away as soon as it happens. It will immediately cause the game to cause a second one in just a couple more hits from the same Frostbite Ice Storm. In this case, the Frostbite coming from the Ice Storm is so powerful that you can literally cause 2 consecutive Frostbites, one after another, in one single sword cast, as long as you have the Fire's Deadly Sin activated. So here's the first one happening, and immediately after that, during the same Ice Storm, the second one pops off right away. Now, in terms of the setup, it's actually as minimal as it gets. I'm not using anything out of the ordinary. Maybe the only thing that boosts up my damage in this case is the Shard of Alexander, since it directly affects the weapon skill, but everything else is just there for support. Like the Source Seals are just there to give me some stats so that I can either equip or use these spells and weapons. Meanwhile, I'm only using a Filigree so that I can reduce some of the mana costs, which by the way are already extremely low. The Ice Storm has a very small mana cost for all of the benefits that it gives you. Even the seal that I'm using with this one is just a default one that you can buy from the vendors, and the reason is because, fire is not going to be the main damage component. It's not even going to deal enough damage to even be worth it. It's just there to reset that frost lost build up, and that's pretty much it, which is why I've invested minimal points into Faith just so that I can cast the Fire's Deadly Sin in the first place. Now, even without this, even if you go against bosses that might have natural frost resistances or just don't get build-ups cast on them, like for example the Kindred enemies are quite notorious for that, you can still fully stagger them with the Ice Storm and still deal very high damage against them. In many of these situations, it required no more than 2 of Ice Storms to completely stagger one of these Kindred and then immediately follow up with a very powerful attack. Case in which I would still recommend keeping hold of that Misericord as an offhand alternative to maybe the Seal, so that you can follow up with a front or back stab and deal the maximum amount of damage possible. In many of the situations, that means way higher damage than you're actually doing with most of the builds in the game. But otherwise, there are some weaknesses that you might need to know of. One of them is the fact that if enemies tend to move a lot, or if you're fighting against bosses that quickly jump in and out of fights, obviously this build kind of falls off a bit short. So in this situation, you might want to preemptively cast one of these storms so that you can catch them when they do get near you, because you only needed 2 times to hit them before they get staggered and then follow up with more powerful attacks. Also, against enemies that tend to spam attacks, you can get damaged even though you are getting quite a bit of resistance to getting interrupts during the animation of the Ice Storm, but still bigger attacks will interrupt you nonetheless. Anyway, on a final note, for everybody who didn't watch yesterday's video or just want to have quick access to these items, you can find the Zammers Curved Blade by just defeating the boss in the Giant's Conquering Hero's Grave right here in the mountaintops. Of course, the best way to reach that spot is to go from this waypoint right here at the Giant's Grave post and then make your way to the right side until you reach the ruins right here on to the right side. Now, instead of it, you do kind of have to go through an area. There's going to be some shaded enemies. As I've explained yesterday, you can maybe use some of these line-up platforms to remove that shade off them, and then you're going to be able to defeat them. You're going to eventually want to progress through this quite easily, actually, all the way until you reach the second elevator, which will bring you to one of the final areas. There is going to be one final troll enemy here that's also shaded that will protect the boss zone, but again, if you make the lift go up again, will light up that platform right in front of it so that you can use it to remove the shade of the troll and then defeat it. And the only thing that remains is going to be Zammer himself, that, as I've said yesterday, also drops one of the coolest armor sets in the game, but the really awesome weapon is obviously going to be the most important of them all. For Misericord, if you do want to get that, you can actually find it quite early over at the Stormvale Castle, right here into the room right side of the Grafted Scion mini-boss in the area, but you will need one of these stone ward keys to open it up. It's also one of the places you find a wet blade in, but yeah, the knife will be right here in the back. And of course, if you do want Fire's Deadly Sin, you do have to first unlock one of these kind of like pictures at the Fortified Manor in Lindell, and then make your way into this village with the Godskin boss and head over behind this house where you will see an NPC despawning and you will get the Fire's Deadly Sin right away. This is it with the setup though. Let me know what you think about it. Have you used it against any bosses so far? And of course, I'll see you guys in the next video.